Hey, it's Random Code here, and today we're going to continue with the next day of Advent of Code, which at this point is day 3. And this is a bit more complicated than yesterday, where in the first part we have this entire list of data points separated by dots, and then based on the position of these points, we need to find any valid data that is next to any special character. For example, in this case, 114 would not be valid because it's not next to any special characters, either next to it, below it, above it, or diagonally. But 35 is valid because it's next to a star, 633 is valid because next to a hashtag, and so on. So there's kind of like two steps. We need to find numbers, and we then need to check if this number is valid or not valid, and then we simply need to add them all together. So I have created this monster, more or less, which is simply able to find a value. I then have a is index valid, which then checks for each number in the number if that specific number is valid, because just one of the numbers in a connection of numbers are valid, then the entire number is valid. And then I have a small checker to check if a character is special. So there's quite a lot of code. I'm not going to go through it line by line, but we're going to discuss like the general process or thought process. So to find a value, I first pass the entire schematic, meaning this entire input, where each line is going to be a list of a string. This is just going to be string. It's actually just string, so we have a list of strings where each string is going to be a line in the file. I would then like to find all the values first, and I'll only add the values if they're valid. I then keep track of my current index. So this is going to be index 1. And then whenever we get to the end of the line, this is then going to be the index of length of the first line plus 1. So we have a continuous index, allowing me to kind of keep track of where we are. And from that index, I can then calculate all the positions around it. So for each string, so for each line in the schematic, I have some kind of state saying is the current value valid? I then start to build a value. I then go through each of my chars in my list, one by one. And I then simply check if this digit is a value, do something special, otherwise just continue and increment index. So for example, here we're going to keep going as the digit, it's not. At some point we're going to hit 3. 3 is then added to my string builder, value in progress. And I then check is index valid, meaning is any of the surrounding characters a special character. In this case, 3, it's not valid. So is value is not going to be set, but as mentioned, my 3 is going to be added to my value in progress. So now we have a setup of value in progress is 3, but my is value valid is still false. We then hit here, we then increment index, and we keep running the loop once again. We then hit 8. Again, it's going to be checked. Is it valid? So meaning is there a specific character surrounding it? That's not. It's going to keep being false. We're going to add our 8 to our value in progress. Then we're going to hit 0. Again, it's going to be added, but it's still not valid. The next time, our special character is not a digit. So we're going to hit the else block. And we then check, is our value in progress larger than 0, meaning we have actually found a number? And is the value also valid? If it is, then add it to a list of values, meaning we found a valid value. If it's not, we just simply reset our value in progress by setting the length to 0, meaning we're kind of like clearing our string builder. So that's the process. We start building a value, and then for each digit, again, this is not an optimal way of doing it because we're actually checking multiple areas at the same time. But let's do another example. If we, for example, look at 217, we're going to hit 2. We're going to check surrounding it. Is it valid? No, it's not. This value is going to be false again. We're going to hit 1. Is it valid? No, it's not. We're going to hit 7. And this time, a surrounding value is a special character. meaning our isValueValid is going to be set to true. And we would then now hit the else block because the next character is not digit. And we now check, is the length of value in progress larger than 0? It is. And is our value valid? It is. We then simply add the value to our values list, reset our string builder, and reset our isValueValid back to false. And that is more or less just what we're doing for the entire page, just iterating through all the lines one by one. And one thing to note, in this first setup, I had an issue where if the integer was valid and at the end of the line, it would not be added because I'm using like the next empty space to kind of insert. So I added a simply check that when we are at the end of the line, we simply check once again if we have found a value and it's valid, add it to our list of values. And that is more or less the general process I use to solve this little problem. And now I have a few times mentioned that we kind of check the surrounding values, are they special character? And what's actually happening is this part, this is index valid. And there's a bunch of, I don't know, relatively simple math, but more or less, if we have a focus on I just get this index, then I get the row above and check for these three, the current row, check for these three, row below, and check for these three. Using two for loops, where I'm going from -1 to 1, meaning my index go behind 1, -1, 0 on the line, and +1, 1 in front. And then I'm doing a bunch of min and max to ensure that we cannot go below 0. So if we're on the edge, we're not checking on the edge. And if we are, we can check below, above, and so on. And this is definitely not the most optimal way of doing it. Here for every digit we're checking all the 9 surrounding and itself values to check if they're special, and we're doing it for all of the numbers, meaning we would have a bunch of areas that are checked multiple times. But this is a relatively simple way of doing it and the quickest way I could think of. And it's special to very simply checking if the value is not a digit and it's not equal to dot, then it's special. And then having these helper methods, I can then very simple just read my text file as a list of strings. My result is then going to be my find value for my input. Well, our find value is the first one where we find the list of all the valid values. This is valid values. We then go through them and just add them together. And let me showcase it runs. Again, running it is not too interesting because we just get a number, in this case, 500,000. But that is my solution to day part 1 and day part 2. At first seem kind of complicated, but it's actually very simple when I just add a few things to what I already have created. But now we need to find gear numbers or gear ratios, which are two numbers connected by a star, and only two numbers connected exactly by a star. So in this case, for example, 467 and 35 are a gear ratio, so these two numbers need to be extracted and multiplied, and then added to all the other gear ratios. And 114 is not a gear ratio, 633 is not a gear ratio, even though it's connected to a special character, but it's not connected to another number using a star. 617, not a gear ratio, it's connected to a star, but not another number. And then again, 755 and 598 are also gear ratios. So my first thought process, oh, this is going to be kind of complicated. We need to, at this point, see a star and then find the next number also connected to the star. But I'm kind of doing it like the other way around. So I'm more or less using most of the same code to find, again, special numbers. But now I have changed my special number checker. Check it's not connected to a dot, but now it's when it's connected to a star. So now we first of all find all the gear numbers. I have then created a new values list, where before the values list was simply just a list of integers. Our values list and our list of integers mapped to an index, meaning we will have a map of the index of a star pointing to all the values connected to this star. And in the end, this will then allow us to have a map of all values connected to the different stars. I can then simply from this map only look at the values where the list is only length 2, meaning we only want the gear ratios that are where two numbers exactly are connected to one star. So two numbers are connected to one index of a star, and we then simply extract these values and multiply them together and add all those numbers together. So it's actually not too complicated, and we're using the basic principle from part 1, where we're going through all our chars. For each char, we're checking if they're a digit, and then check do they have a gear index, meaning are they next to a star? And that's more or less it. I'm not going to go through all this code because it's very similar to part 1 and it gets kind of complicated, but not really. But again, the same principle. We check a number. Is it next to a star? If it's next to a star, add it at the index of the star, which is the gear index. And we then keep doing all the numbers. And we then at the end say, okay, was this number a valid gear number? If it is, then add this number to the map with the index of the gear index, and the values then added to the list. And then in the end, when we find a result, we then use find gear connections, which then provides us this list map of indexes to list. We then just get the list of values because we actually do not really care about the index of the gear ratio or the gears. We just care about the values. So I get the values, I stream them, map them. I simply check if the size of the values is exactly 2. Take the first value and multiply by the second value and return it. And if it's not equal to 2, just return 0. And then in the end, we simply just add all these numbers together. And again, we can run it. Not so interesting, but just to see it works. Get a very large number this time. But I hope you found it kind of interesting hearing about my solution and my thoughts to day 3, part 1 and 2. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. And I wish you all a wonderful day.